Hello everybody, this is Antonio Wolf. For those of you who watched my Bernie Sanders and reparations video, thank you for the supportive comments. There were some other weird comments in there, but you know, it's all good. I'm kind of glad that a lot of people found my opinion on that and my comments on that meaningful and useful for something. Anyways, I want to comment on Kim Iverson's comment on Bernie Sanders' response to the reparations question. And I want to comment on it only because Kim Iverson is basically the epitome of the stereotype of the milquetoast progressive liberal. And so her response is what the typical progressive liberal's response is going to be. So I think it deserves some critique. The first thing that Kim brings up really is that, you know, in her gut, you know, at face value, you know, she wants reparations, you know, she really does. But when she thinks about it, it just doesn't make sense. It's just not possible, you know, it's asking too much. And anyways, you know, it's all economics, right? It's all economics. So if we just, you know, give everybody social programs, especially programs that, you know, help everybody who's poor. Well, most of you American descendants of slaves are poor, and a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So isn't that good enough? Isn't that good enough, black people? You know, can't you just stop talking about reparations? You know, it's not going to happen anyways, right? You know, just stop asking for it. You know, stop annoying us about it. Not quite, Kim Iverson. Well, anyways, so she starts off, the main points are that Bernie Sanders was right not to answer the question because the question was a trap. Not only is the question unpopular, but it's unpopular because, and she doesn't say this, but it's the implication, it's unpopular because the word has way too many assumptions. You know, people hear reparations and immediately they think handouts. For American descendants of slaves. Even though this has nothing to do with handouts, this has everything to do with a justice claim, just as any other crime, just as any other civil lawsuit has anything to do with justice. I mean, even if you get rid of the whole slavery thing, fine, you know, we're not going to do it on the basis of slavery. No reparations for slavery, you know, all the slaves are dead. Okay. There's still plenty of things reparations need to be given for. I mentioned in my last videos, everybody knows those things, Black Wall Street, the terrorism perpetrated on the black community, redlining, etc., etc. But the point that she brings up is a really stupid point. It's a really bad point, which is that reparations is too vague. You know, Bernie Sanders can't answer the question because it's too vague. You know, you got to tell us, black people, you got to tell us American descendants of slaves, you know, what exactly are reparations? You know, what exactly do you want? You know, because we can't say yes or no. We're like lawyers. You know, we just can't say yes or no if you don't spell it out for us what reparations exactly is. You know, you're asking us if we like apples, but, you know, we got to be careful. You know, it might be a trap. I don't know what you mean by apples. You might mean something else than I think it is. So you got to tell me exactly, you know, define it, every little detail, until I can say yes, because I need to make sure that it's up to snuff. That's a ridiculous demand. You know, we don't demand that for anything else. You know, look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal. That has no fucking details. Oh, but everybody's backing it. Has no details whatsoever. But everybody's backing it. Nobody says, like, how are we going to pay for that? How are we going to do that? How are we going to get off coal? How are we going to get off fossil fuels? Everybody just assumes that we can. Well, why can't we just assume that we can do reparations too? Oh, of course, because it's black people, because it's American descendants of slaves, because it's an admittance of guilt, because you got to give money to people you owe. So that whole issue of the question is vague. I mean, everybody knows. They just ask, do you support reparations or not? He could have just said yes or no. And the best thing he could have done is says, yes, and by reparations, you know, I think it includes all my social programs that I'm talking about, you know, I think that's part of reparations. And he could have said, but, you know, something specific needs to be done for the American descendants of slaves community. And I don't have a plan yet, but we'll look into it. That's all he had to say. You know, we'll look into it. And you know what? You know, everybody else is saying, we'll look into it. We know they don't mean it, but fine, okay. Even if you don't mean it, even if Bernie Sanders, you know, just said it to please the American descendants of slaves community, you know, I'll just say ADOS from now on. It's a mouthful, but it has to be said. You know, so just to please ADOS, fine, you know, but he said it. And the fact that he said it, the fact that all the other Democrats are saying, the fact that Nancy Pelosi is now pushing a long stalled bill for studying reparations is saying something. It's saying that this issue is growing stronger, that this issue is becoming more important, that this issue is not going away, that once everybody's forced to say it, it's now on the table. And the next time it comes up, the next time elections come up, now you can ask every single politician, are you for or against reparations? You know, not just these presidential politicians, but every single one. Are you for or against reparations? What are you going to do for me, you know, as the ADOS community? And that's important. You know, that legitimizes the issue. This position, which it is now, that they're forced to say it, legitimizes the issue. Even if these are not the people who are going to do anything about it. Like, you know that it's got to be forced. You know that you're going to have to make them do it. But now it's on the table. That is super important. That's why he has to say it. That's why all of them have to say it. You have to force them to do that. You can't just let them skate by and say, oh, well, it's a divisive issue. Fuck that. That's not your problem. You know, that's not the ADOS problem. That's everybody else's problems. But the ADOS community keeps pushing this issue, and everybody else has to recognize that this is an issue and that they're going to have to face it. And you're going to be either for it or against it, but you better say which. And so the secondary points about that are, well, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. You know, isn't that enough? You know, aren't all these programs that Bernie Sanders is pushing for, you know, helping the poor, isn't that enough to fix the problem? You know, isn't that going to get rid of most of the issues that you know, reparations are supposed to fix? No, it's not. Anybody knows who looks into it that issues of, say, institutional racism are not going away just because you give black people health care, or just because you pay for universal free college, or all these other things. That's not going away. Those kind of policies are very different policies. Everybody knows that banks not lending to you if you are ADOS is not going away just because all these other things, you know, are now on the ground. There have to be social programs. There have to be community programs. And that brings up this whole other issue that it's the biggest issue with her response, I think, which is a straw man of the reparations argument, as seemingly asking, and this is, it's really shitty. It's a right-wing talking point, you know. These are right-wing deflection points for why reparations is just not something you should even talk about, because, like, they trivialize it, they make it silly. One is, she makes it about individual reparations. And she says, well, what do you expect us to do? You know, just to give every single ADOS, you know, $20,000? Well, where's that money going to come from? And, you know, what are they going to do with that money? And she's like, you know, can we, you know, how do we know that we give it to the right people? Blah, blah, blah. As far as I know, you know, people who I follow on this issue are not saying anything of the sort. So, you know, either she's highly ignorant and didn't even bother looking into any of the scholarship before opening her mouth, or she's being disingenuous. You know, she's just putting up a false face there, and she really deep down doesn't want reparations. She doesn't believe in reparations. But where was I? Yeah, her point about you know, she makes a straw man that reparations is ADOS people asking for, you know, just a free handout money, you know, free check for every single one, as if that's going to fix anything. Everybody knows that it has to be community programs. It has to be, like, many things. I mean, and she then goes on to a whole lot of bullshit that it's irrelevant, you know, like, well, even if we did that, you know, how do we determine, you know, who is and who isn't, And, you know, how far does this go? You know, who is a real ADOS? You know, is it a white guy that, you know, has like a grandma or a great-grandma that was a, you know, ADOS, but, you know, the rest of the lineage is white? Do they get reparations? Obviously not. Does the Kenyan who comes to the U.S. get reparations? Obviously not. Does the third, fourth generation, you know, African Americans, the people came from Africa and then became Americans, do they get reparations? Obviously not. That's a simple issue to fix. You know, you don't have to do a DNA test. Everybody knows that the lineage is easy to see. The skin color is easy to see. If you don't have to worry about the problem of driving while black, you're definitely not getting reparations. If you don't have the problem in that your parents or your grandparents were ADOS and lived poor lives because of structural and explicit racism, you don't get reparations. Easy as that. You know, that's a nonsense argument. It's pointless. And that's not the whole issue of reparations, by the way. It's a mix. You know, nobody has to say that it has to be all one or the other. It's not just give block grants to the communities. It doesn't have to be that way. Or just only give it to individuals. The way I see it, you're going to have to do it in a mix. You're going to have policies which are targeted at individual stuff with individual people. And you're going to have policies that have to target community stuff, groups. And that's fine. You know, those things are different. And as for like her issue of, well, you got to tell us what reparations is. You know, we can't possibly, you know, say we're for or against reparations if we don't know what it is. Okay, here's an idea for reparations. You know that big Green New Deal that everybody who's a liberal and their grandma is pushing? Put it in stipulation for those things that at least 25% of the contract business deals that go on, you know, paying the federal government paying for this new green infrastructure goes to American descendants of slaves. That those deals, those contracts go to American descendants of slaves, companies, go to training American descendants of slaves to get into that infrastructure. That's reparations. That's reparations. That's part of it. But don't act like this whole bullshit of, oh, we can't imagine what it is. You know, I just don't know what you mean. Bullshit. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You know, it's that simple. Government contracts, affirmative action, all these other things. There are multiple things, and all those multiple things have to be done, and don't act as if it's impossible. It actually is quite possible. You know, she's bringing up a right-wing talking point of, one, we don't want to give handouts, okay? Well, it doesn't have to be a handout. I don't think anybody's asking for a handout. You know, I think a lot of it is being as asking for projects. You know, you need to infuse the black community with projects. You need to rebuild the black community infrastructures, rundown housing, schools, all these other things. Things that require work. Things that you ought to pay black people to serve black people. Easy. The Green New Deal things I was mentioning, everything like that. You know, easy peasy. Just put it in. 20% of, you know, federal spending, 20% of all those things. It doesn't even have to be on the state level. You know, these are big programs coming from the top level of the government, and it can be put down, you know, into the black community, into the ADOS community. So this whole issue that she brought up of like, well, you know, it's too much, you know, like, to whom do we give and how much do we give, and how long do we give it, you know, do we give it to every single person who was descendant of slaves, or do we just give it to the current generation of descendants of slaves, and, you know, their parents or grandparents, etc. And the final point, and that's nonsense, you know, it's a red herring. It's a right-wing talking point. I don't even know why she brought it up. She also brings up this whole thing like, well, you know, if we have to pay the American descendants of slaves, do we have to pay everybody else? No. You know, because on my last video, you know, people were bringing up, well, you know, the first slaves that came to the U.S. were actually, in fact, you know, these Irish immigrant children. And, what about their reparations? What about them? I don't see Irish people in squalor here in the United States. I don't see a movement by a significant portion of Irish people that we can't ignore, making a big fuss about it. Maybe there are some. You know how much the United States is going to give a fuck? Zero. You know how much they have to give a fuck about ADOS reparations? The moment the boots hit the streets, quite a lot. That's how much they had to give a fuck about the civil rights movement. Once the boots hit the streets, they had to care, all right? They couldn't ignore it. They could ignore everybody else, but they can't ignore this. Every single group has to fight for the recognition of their claim. This is a justice claim, but everybody knows that justice is no easy thing, that you don't get it for free, that the oppressors and the people who have to pay never willingly pay. You have to force them. And I think that the ADOS community is in a position in which they have the numbers where they can force this if they put the effort into it. And I mean, it's not an easy effort. It's a hard fight. But the fight can be had, and the fight, I think, can be won. You might not get everything you want, but you're going to get something. And lastly, I mean, she brings up a stupid point, which is, well, anybody who says they're for reparations, Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and all these other people, they're lying anyways. Like, we know they're not going to do it, and we know that, it's so unpopular that even if they tried, they couldn't do it. So, if they tell you that they're for reparations, it's pointless, right? So if Bernie Sanders, even said no, he'd at least be telling you the truth that nobody else is telling you, and they're lying. So, why are you hating on Bernie? Why are you hating on Bernie, ADOS? He's telling you the truth. You know that Kamala Harris isn't going to give you anything, that Cory Booker is not going to give you anything, that Elizabeth Warren isn't going to give you anything. So why are you mad that Bernie Sanders isn't going to give you anything? They're all lying anyways. At least he's telling you the truth. At least he's an honest politician. Honest politician he may be. But that's not your problem now, is it? That's not the ADOS community's problem. They want to push this issue. This is an issue that's important for them. It's a justice issue. It's a legitimate issue. And I say, go on, power to the people. Keep at it. Keep pushing it, because it is your issue. Nobody else is going to push it for you. And so you need to push it as hard as possible. And, this is to bring up a whole other thing, which is implied in all the things that she said, which was, it's unrealistic. Reparations is just unrealistic. Accept it, ADOS. You're not going to get reparations because it's just too hard. Yes, we owe you tens of trillions of dollars, probably 14, maybe 20 trillion. We can't pay that back. If we had to pay that back, we'd go broke. Can't do it. Just can't. And, we can't give you affirmative action. It's going to piss too many people off. We can't do it. We just can't. Can't you just accept Medicaid? Can't you just accept, free college? Can't you just accept, $15 minimum wage? Can't you just accept that? No, I don't think you can. This idea that this is not possible is the same thing they said about the civil rights movement. It's not possible. The liberals told King, you're asking for too much, Dr. King. You got to slow down. You got to realize you can only ask, little bit by bit. Maybe in 100 years, you can finally get this civil rights bill. But right now, it's too hard. It's too unpopular. It's too divisive. We know what Dr. King thought about that. You can read the letter from Birmingham jail to know what you should say about that. Everybody who's saying this is divisive, no, you're divisive. What's your problem? Why are you against a justice claim? It's one thing to say, look, I don't think it's possible. Fine, shut up, move aside, let them try. Let the ADOS community try. That's their problem. If it gets done or not, it's not your problem now, is it? Unless, of course, you really don't want to pay. Unless, of course, you don't want to give up any air power. In which case, it's understandable why you would be against it. It's understandable why you want people to shut up about it. But every politician, every businessman knows that when you go to the negotiation table, the first offer you make is not the offer you think you'll get. It's an unrealistic offer. It's the offer that you wish you got in a perfect world, if not more. In business, you ask for way more than you think you'll get. And hopefully the other person, you're hoping that the other person, might just be stupid enough to offer you more than you thought you'd get. And if you get that, great. And if you get just what you thought you'd expected, great. But nobody goes in with a realistic answer. She's telling you, have a realistic demand. That's not your business. That's not the ADOS community's business. That's bad politics. That's stupid politics. That's what the Democrats have been doing with Republicans this entire time. They go to the table what they think they're going to get, and they get even less. So go in, ask big, demand big. Yes, everybody knows you're probably not going to get the full amount, but you might get more than you thought. You might get more than you thought, and that's what it takes. You got to demand big, ask big, work big, and you might just get far more than you thought. So whether politicians are lying, whether Bernie Sanders means it or not, the issue of reparations is now on the table. And I don't think, and I hope it doesn't go away. I hope this movement doesn't die. I hope it gets pushed, that from now on, every politician has to answer the question, do you support reparations? And if they say no, I hope there's a consequence to it. I hope that the ADOS community, in large part, no longer keeps just giving their votes for free to these sellouts, to these liars. But anyways, to finish this up, Kim Iverson's whole points in her comments were bullshit, honestly. They are, at best, ignorant. They are, at worst, damaging. They are, at worst, false arguments, which are strawmanning and misrepresenting the reparations question and what people who are asking, demanding reparations want. Just insane, like, well, it's, you have to tell us exactly what you want with reparations. Don't act stupid. Don't act stupid. If you just ask, like, do you believe in reparations? Yes, we know that the right wing already has made up their minds as to what reparations is, no matter what you say. Sorry. And you're not going to get those people. So why are you going to pander to those people? Why are you going to try to pull yourself back to please those people? Those people are not going to vote for you anyways. Those people aren't going to help you anyways. So screw it. This is a Democratic Party issue. This is an issue of ADOS people, the ADOS community. Let them make demands. Let the politicians then figure something out. We demanded Medicare for all. We didn't come up with a program. I didn't come up with a program. I didn't think about it much for shit. All I said was, well, tax rich people. It's just like the ADOS community. Tax rich people, tax rich white people, tax everybody else. Pay for it somehow. That's not our issue. That's not the ADOS issue. Let the politicians figure out. And when it comes to the table, where, you finally have to argue with the Republicans, ask big, and hope for the best. And if you get what you thought you were going to get realistically, you've won. That's all my comments on this. Thanks for listening.